I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week. Election day has come and passed for us in Louisiana, and nothing has changed, at least in terms of who's representing you in Congress. Statewide voter turnout was almost 46%. That's according to unofficial results from the Louisiana Secretary of State's office. The big race statewide was for the U.S. Senate seat, held by incumbent John Kennedy, and he will hold on to his seat for another 6 years, with 62% of the votes cast in his favor. First District Congressman and Minority Whip Republican Steve Scalise easily won re-election with 73% of the vote. In the Second District, which runs from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, Democrat Troy Carter also skated to victory over his Republican challenger with 77% of the vote. In the Third Congressional District, which includes Lake Charles and Acadiana, Republican Clay Higgins avoided a runoff with 64% of the vote, despite having a vocal Republican and 2 Democratic opponents. In the 5th Congressional District, which is the largest row crop district in the country, Republican Congresswoman Julia Letlow garnered 68% of the vote in her first re-election bid. The race for Louisiana's 6th District saw the widest margin of victory, with Republican Congressman Garrett Graves getting 80% of the votes. Now, you may have noticed that we skipped the 4th District. That's because Republican Congressman Mike Johnson ran with no opposition. If you want to take a look at the unofficial results and check out the results for the statewide constitutional amendments, none of which affect agriculture, visit our website at twilatv.org. This is the time of year when Louisiana skies are filled with migratory birds flying south for the winter. Our state is a major area for birds passing by, as well as a popular stop for birds. A new program to track them and help scientists understand their migration is in its 2nd year. This week, TWILA's Neil Melanson tells us how our sugarcane fields are a sweet spot for research.
Sugarcane harvest is rolling across the 9,000 acres of A. Wilbert Sons land. The dry weather has helped move things along quickly this year. This Doppler radar, though, isn't for the weather. It's here in the cane fields to help track birds, according to the Nature Conservancy's Director of Science, Brian Piazza.
There are a lot of partnership opportunities between conservation and agriculture. This is a great one because it's providing us critical scientific information on the importance of that large block of habitat in the Atchafalaya Basin to migrating birds, something that we've known for a long time, but we haven't really been effectively able to measure. And this project is providing us some of the first quantifiable data on how important that system is for migrating birds.
According to Piazza, the program began last year in the Atchafalaya Basin. However, he says the cane fields are better for the Doppler radar than the swamp.
Last year, we had this along the levee in the Atchafalaya Basin, but what we found was that the tree height, as this thing shoots a beam, it shoots at different angles up in the sky. And what we found was that those trees, even trees that were far off in the distance, were impeding the ability of this radar to see for long distances at certain angles. So we brought it here to this sugarcane farm because this thing can see all the way across the Atchafalaya Basin from here, and we're probably about 7 miles from the levee right here.
The migrating birds appear just like weather does, but those little blue dots are flocks of birds headed south.
We're actually seeing evidence of migrating birds. We can actually see them as clouds of color that move across the basin from a north to south direction, which is the direction that the birds are migrating this time of year. And we can see those as clouds, and all of those clouds that we see are getting transferred into how much bird migration is going on, potentially sort of what size the birds are, and how big these flocks are.
Piazza is working with Marcus Rutherford, a forester for A. Wilbert Sons. They're tracking the birds in real time with an app on Marcus's phone. Rutherford says agriculture and conservation efforts like this one are a natural fit.
They share a lot of values with us as a landowner. They're focused on conservation, sustainability of the resources. They're also a great resource for research. Only the largest companies can afford their own dedicated research teams. And we're a very small company, so relying on these kind of groups, these kind of organizations to provide research and data-driven results is really critical for us.
Rutherford says conservation efforts are as important to rural residents as they are in the rest of the country as they live on the land every day.
It's a balance of economic and ecological factors oftentimes when you're dealing with forestry and agriculture. And we do our best as stewards of the land to maintain that balance for the integrity of the future.
Now, if you'd like to track what the program is doing and see those birds migrating in real time on radar, you can download the app for free. We'll link it over to you on our website at twilatv.org. And Avery, I know what a tech geek you are, so you can actually get some of the technical details. I talked with Brian Piazza in a separate little segment that our social media coordinator, Allie Shipley, has put on our social media and our website. And it goes into all the details about what that Doppler can do and where it's been all over the world. And it tracks storms. It's been to Peru, all kinds of stuff.
Wait a second. You throw that word geek at me. You were in here when you found out about the story. You came into the office and were like, I got to do this. You all geeked out about it. What was it like being out there?
Well, you can really see that in those sugarcane fields, they have those wide open spaces. The trees, of course, of the Atchafalaya Swamp block that, and we talk about that in the package. But the being able to see that space and then know that it's operating and then getting the data from it in real time on our phones is just amazing. I mean, it's amazing what it's doing. And it's beaming stuff out to the University of Delaware and to Washington, D.C. It's got a Wi-Fi in it that's sending that information that it's getting from the radar in real time. So it was just amazing to witness.
Fun story. Thank you very much, Neil Lawson. Well, it seems birds are not the only creatures getting around, and folks in Wisconsin are not happy about it. For the first time ever, there was a conviction under that state's invasive species law, and it was against a Louisiana company for importing the red swamp crawfish into the Badger State. Wisconsin officials started that investigation in 2020 when several grocery stores offered live red swamp crawfish. You see, in Wisconsin, the red swamp crawfish is considered an invasive species, and folks there are worried it could outcompete the native crayfish species in that state. An article published in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel cited a passerby in Ozaukee County who spotted a red crawfish, quote, acting aggressively. Investigators tracked that aggressive crawfish back to a home where a crawfish boil had taken place a week earlier. Wisconsin officials fined Louisiana Crawfish Company $34,000. And while we may think they should just eat them like we do, I will point out that Louisiana is having some issues with invasive species as well, like the apple snail and the nutria, and we've tried eating one of those. Now, I left out one invasive species that some people do eat, feral hogs. According to a recent LSU Ag Center survey, it's estimated wild hogs cause $90 million in damage to Louisiana farms and ranches every year. This week, TWILA's Carl Wiggers shows us how researchers at LSU are finding another way for farmers to fight these pests.
This is a rice field near Crowley, Louisiana. Those are paths made by feral hogs. Those gaps are where those hogs have rooted around and destroyed parts of this rice crop. This is the kind of damage happening all across the state. A recent survey from the LSU Ag Center found the damage estimates to be about $91 million every year. Dr. Glenn Gentry with the LSU Ag Center has been working on a solution for many years now and has developed a lethal bait using sodium nitrite with the help of the LSU Chemistry Department.
We had to come up with a bait design that pigs would readily consume and come up with something that would kill pigs and relatively leave non-targets unaffected.
Forming a fish meal flavor and the toxicants into a bait that will work in the wild is another challenge. That's why Dr. Gentry enlisted the help of the LSU Chemistry Department years ago, now chaired by Dr. John Poyman.
What we needed to do was just keep the sodium nitrite, the active ingredient in the bait, from breaking down and giving a bad smell. And so we found all we had to do was add basically an antacid to it. In the same way that you take an antacid for an upset stomach, this would raise what we call the pH to make it very basic, and that'll stabilize and keep the sodium nitrite from breaking down.
Along with keeping the chemistry from breaking down and the toxicant becoming ineffective, Dr. Poyman and his team also worked to make sure the bait would not physically break down when a hog is eating it and leave a lot of crumbs on the landscape.
So we needed to make the bait into a form that would be flexible and squishy, so when a hog bit it, it wouldn't fracture into a lot of little pieces. Oh, I think we have the chemistry down. That's not the problem. And we now have a formulation that is really functional. It works well in their baiting system. The hogs eat it. It doesn't leave contamination in the environment. So I think we have that part down. Now it's an issue that's regulatory and actually delivering it into the environment.
For Gentry, the next step is clear, but proving difficult.
Field trials. If we can get field trials done, and we're working now trying to get an experimental use permit from the EPA, which is proven increasingly difficult. We can try all we want to simulate what happens in the pens, but it's not the same. And until we can prove that the bait that we have is effective on the landscape, we're not going to be able to move forward.
Even after trials and these tools eventually make it to the marketplace, it will still not be the magic bullet for Louisiana's hog problems.
It's going to take management, and this is the toxicants, whichever are put on the market, will just be another tool in the toolbox. It's going to take hunting, it's going to take trapping, it's going to take toxicants for us to learn how to manage these populations. You've got to remove 75% of the population just to hold numbers where they are right now.
According to Dr. Gentry, farmers could have this tool on their farm within a couple of years. Now that's assuming they can get their experimental use permit and expand their testing into real-world scenarios, even right there on Idlewild Research Station. If you'd like to see the survey and learn more about the research that they're doing, head over to our website at twilatv.org. And Avery, I've got to say, this is one of the very first stories I did.
Right.
We didn't talk about this before, really, but whenever I was an intern,
I was about to say,
I did a story on this.
This story wasn't one of the first ones you did, but about feral hogs.
Right. So it's been an issue for a long time, and Dr. Gentry has been working for, I think he said 8 to 9 years on this, but the problem with wild hogs is the way that they reproduce so fast. He told me one sow and her litter can become, in 48 months, can become hundreds. 72 months, it's thousands.
Wow.
So they're predicting somewhere in the million, around 1 million hogs right now in the state, and they have to kill 70%, 70 to 75% every year to keep that population where it's at.
Right, to stay
just
at a
right
baseline.
where it's at. It's crazy. It's crazy how much work is ahead of Louisiana farmers and LSU folks.
So going from that first story you did to now, what have you seen different? What has changed between those two times?
Well, one thing I've seen on my own family's farm is these farmers are finding new ways to fight. I mean, we've done stories about people hunting. Hunting is it's a recreational aspect, but it also has the management tool. There's also folks starting to trap. And one thing Dr. Gentry said is all of these methods to maintaining this population are going to be necessary. They're all going to be tools that these farmers and landowners need to have in their toolbox. And this toxicant that they're working on will just be another one of those tools. So hopefully we can get it out onto the market. I say we like I have something to do with it. But hopefully it's on the market soon because, I mean, farmers need some help. $91 million a year is nothing to bat an eye at. I mean, that's big numbers.
And not to stretch this out too far, but, you know, a lot of folks say, well, why don't we just fly in helicopters and mow them down? But you had some drone shots that showed the problem with that.
Yeah, even in that couple-acre pen, they have these hogs for research. There are trees, and when they go in that tree line, from overhead in my drone, you can't see it. So it's a problem, and it's going to be it's not quite as easy as out in West Texas where there's a couple trees per 1,000 acres. So it's a different story over here in Louisiana.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that story to us, Carl Wiggers. Well, weather has not been kind to Louisiana agriculture this year. As Craig Gautreaux shows us, beef and dairy producers are feeling the effects of drought conditions on their pastures at a critical time as winter is coming.
It's November, and these fields would normally be covered with a green canopy of ryegrass. Lack of rainfall across Louisiana has pastures looking brown and short, and producers haven't been able to get their winter pastures established.
So typically, producers shoot for October 15th is your plant date. You want to have everything done. Now, I've talked to a lot of producers this year with the lack of rain. They're pushing that back possibly up until November 14th.
Getting ryegrass fields established later means fewer days of grazing and more days of feeding costly hay. For dairy farmers, this is an added burden to their slim profit margins.
The drought conditions here have really affected the dairy producers because they normally plant early. They need early grazing, and they're not getting that this year, so they're having to use a lot of hay.
Many cows are carrying calves that will be born in the spring. Because these cows will be fed hay until winter pastures are tall enough to be grazed, producers should have their hay tested to make sure the nutritional needs of their animals are being met.
You got to make sure that you're giving them a high enough quality ration to get them through that pre-calving and post-calving period.
While consumers have seen higher beef prices, cattle producers have not seen a large run-up on the price paid for their cattle, putting them in a precarious position.
It's made things very hard. A lot of our cattle producers are questioning if this is something that's sustainable for them and their families long term.
Because of a wet period during the summer, Louisiana does have an ample supply of hay going into the winter. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
Depending on the quality of the hay, it can cost a producer anywhere from $125 to $375 to feed each head of cattle through the winter. This cost will go higher if ryegrass pastures are not established very soon. Each year in August, farmers markets from Alaska to Florida celebrate everything that makes farmers markets important during National Farmers Market Week. TWILA's Tammy Arender loves a great farmers market. She visited a small market in Louisiana that week and shows us how it's having a big impact on the local community.
This market has been here, the physical location here, since 2000, but prior to that we were behind the Civic Center here in Monroe. So personally I've been coming here for over 4 decades, Tammy.
Charles Hawley and his wife Lisa get up practically in the middle of the night to pick and pack their produce. They bring it about 60 miles one way to the Monroe Farmers Market.
Well, we're right in the top right corner of the boot of Louisiana. We're about 20 miles south of Arkansas and about 12 miles from the Mississippi River.
My husband loves peas.
That rich delta soil produces some of the finest fruits and vegetables around.
Came by today to get some tomatoes and fresh tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and eggplant. You know, I just been coming here for years. Of course, the best tomatoes is Macon Ridge tomatoes to me now. I'm gonna tell you, that's the way to go right there.
What are you shopping for today?
They have the best squash ever.
Caroline Youngblood gets her succulent summer squash from Charles and Norma Spillers.
The produce tastes different. It tastes like I remember it, like it did when it came from my grandfather's garden.
The Spillers garden is just a few miles down the road from this downtown Monroe location.
We're Washita Parish. We're not shipped in.
Sit on that truck for an hour and a half.
All the way from Oak Grove.
So y'all are local.
Yeah, we're local.
I'm unzipping these cream zippers. They shell really easy that opened up. When they get really mature, if you move them around and shake them, they'll fall. The peas will fall out of the pod.
Another benefit of buying at the local farmers market is that you can get advice on recipes, on how to shuck, how to shell, sometimes from the farmer, sometimes from the clientele.
I had always made zucchini bread, but I decided to make a bread using squash and it's savory. Yeah, just a half a cup of cheese. I put jalapenos in it, it's really good.
A little few pieces of link sausage and the cornbread was in the bowl and she put the peas on top of that. It was just like eating a really nice soup.
Whether it's for the recipes, the right fruits and veggies, or the relationships, your local farmers market provides a community connection.
The biggest reason why is because I know where they're grown and who's growing them.
It's like you're buying a piece of art directly from the artist.
In Monroe, I'm Tammy Arender for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture.
Farmers markets are one of the best places to connect directly to the people growing your food, and you're sure to get some of the freshest in town there. To learn more about Louisiana's farmers markets or to find one near you, head over to our website at twilatv.org. Still to come on TWILA, we head out to harvest a crop that many of us will bring right inside our homes and then decorate. Bet you can guess what we're talking about. Stay with us. As one holiday ends, another begins, and for many of us, this means Christmas trees go up. This week, TWILA's Breanne Hendrickson takes us to Curry Farms to see a side of agriculture that doesn't get all the bright lights on it until the end of the year.
In 1980, my wife, she came in one day and said, "What do you think about planting Christmas trees?" And I said, "Why not?"
That is how Curry Farms, now fourth generation farm, planted their roots in the Christmas tree industry and have continued to grow ever since.
Our farm has about almost 6,000 trees growing on it of 4 different ages. It takes us about 4 years to get a tree 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Now there are some exceptions to that. Some of our soil varies, and some of those trees will get 12 to 14 feet tall in that same length of time.
Just like any farmer, Bentley Curry faces challenges. The biggest challenge is one no one can control.
Greatest is when we have a hurricane that stays powerful as it moves north, and we've had thousands of trees blown flat on the ground after a hurricane, and it's pretty labor intensive to go back in, and you have to get special wooden stakes to stand them up and prop them up, and after about 2 days they start trying to, the trunks of the trees try to grow toward the sun, and you end up with, once you get them standing up, all the trees look like they're curtsying to one another. They will straighten out, but it's kind of scary when you first see that happening.
Those challenges don't stop there. They also have to face the bad stigma live trees have.
Obviously, one of the things that you have problems with on a live tree is everybody talks about live trees catching on fire. Well, there's never been a live tree catch on fire. There's been some faulty lighting on the tree that shorted out and made that tree catch on fire, and the plastic tree will burn as well. And it puts off toxic fumes, which will kill you if you don't get out of the room pretty fast.
To Curry Farms, no matter what challenges they face, it is their goal to help create that family experience when you visit.
We're really promoting, come to the farm, walk through the trees, breathe in the fragrance the trees are putting off, find that perfect tree, and here at our farm, we'll actually cut that tree down for you. You don't have to do that. You can come in your Sunday best if you want to. We do as much as we can to encourage the family experience.
There are about 25 to 30 million Christmas trees sold in the United States every year, according to the National Christmas Tree Association. And yes, there is a National Christmas Tree Association. It's been around for 65 years. There are lots of cool facts like that on its website. If you want to find out when you can go to Curry Farms and get your Christmas tree, or if you want to mine the National Christmas Tree Association's website for some interesting facts, visit our website at twilatv.org. Still to come on TWILA, the final harvest. Stay with us. Today's TWILA Boost is a bittersweet one about a farmer in Iowa. Paul Wetter has been farming for 50 years, and this year started out just like all the ones before. However, after finishing planting this spring, Paul started feeling unlike himself and was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. His wife Cindy had one final wish: that Paul have enough strength to harvest the crop he planted. And even though he hasn't felt his best, Paul climbed into his combine and did just that. When asked, Paul replied, "I might not feel good these days, but this view out here is better than anything else in the world." And the reason we and many others around the country know about this story is because photographer Lexi McDonough documented Paul's final harvest. Lexi later shared the heartwarming story and photos on social media, which you can find on the TWILA Facebook page. Our thoughts go out to the Wetter family during this difficult time, and our sincerest thank yous for reminding us all that farming is more than just a job. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when we bring you a Thanksgiving-themed food-focused episode of This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org, and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You'll also find all of these stories and more on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. That way, you know when we put something new out. For all of us here at TWILA, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.